Welcome to another episode of me trying to explain something on my mind, mostly for myself. I'm Arvind Nagarajan. I'm thinking of calling this series, Wouldn't It Be Awesome If? Because most of my thoughts end up going there in some form or fashion anyways. I'll say more about that title at the end if you're interested. Alright, today's topic, Facebook versus Apple, the war between giants. Real quick, I'm going to talk about my takeaways from the GameStop episode, a brief background on Facebook's recent privacy struggles, and then dive into my description of the business of Facebook. If you want to skip ahead to 2 minutes for Facebook's privacy struggles, and skip ahead to 5 minutes for the business of Facebook. All right, let's go. So the GameStop episode, I spent a lot of time thinking about how trading was really very similar to a casino in many ways. And I'd always carried that around with a very negative valence, like this is why you shouldn't trade. But my wife pointed out that I could actually think about it in a positive valence. She was like, you know, when we lived in Connecticut, you used to go to the casino a few times a year. You would say you had some money to burn, and then you'd have fun with it. Why can't you do the same thing with stocks? That was obvious in retrospect, but was really, made me do a complete 180. I thought, wow, that's absolutely right. Like I go to a casino, I have a set amount, and I think of it as already burned. And it's just there as another form of entertainment. So especially during this pandemic, especially now where there's no casino nearby, why not take a little money, set it aside, and use it to have some fun trading? So that was very convincing. So instead of just watching this GameStop saga on the sidelines, now I want to get into the trading business. So I've opened my Schwab account, should be open and active in the next couple days. And honestly, I expect in a few weeks you'll be calling me the Cobra King of Wall Street. Speaking of GameStop, last Thursday, while I was watching the GameStop stock ticker just oscillate during the day, there was an important thing happening. Tim Cook delivered a speech on what was Data Privacy Day. His speech was interesting. A little bit of context. So Apple is introducing some sort of new privacy policy. People are calling it kind of like nutrition labels. You're going to have some sort of nutrition label for any app for how it stores and uses your data. And the more I've looked into this, the more it seems like nutrition label is a really good analogy because honestly, nutrition labels sound simple, but I can't tell a damn thing about what's healthy or not by looking at them. So I really don't think it's that big a deal or it's that important, but let's leave that aside for a moment. It's caused the issue of privacy to kind of come to the forefront, along with recently WhatsApp, a text messaging service that's owned by Facebook, came into the news because they were introducing a new terms of service. Apparently, there was a large debate about whether or not they were to be, what data they were collecting and how they were sharing that with Facebook. And there was a big shift to one of WhatsApp's competitors, Signal, which is a nonprofit that provides encrypted messaging service. So Facebook's been in the news recently about this issue of privacy. And I want to play a little portion of Tim Cook's speech because it's quite provocative.
Technology does not need vast troves of personal data stitched together across dozens of websites and apps in order to succeed. Advertising existed and thrived for decades without it. And we're here today because the path of least resistance is rarely the path of wisdom. If a business is built on misleading users, on data exploitation, on choices that are no choices at all, then it does not deserve our praise. It deserves reform. We should not look away from the bigger picture. At a moment of rampant disinformation and conspiracy theories juiced by algorithms, we can no longer turn a blind eye to a theory of technology that says all engagement is good engagement, the longer the better, and all with the goal of collecting as much data as possible. Too many are still asking the question, how much can we get away with, when they need to be asking, what are the consequences? It is long past time to stop pretending that this approach doesn't come with a cost of polarization, of lost trust, and yes, of violence. A social dilemma cannot be allowed to become a social catastrophe.
Wow, that was quite convincing. Facebook is under fire from Tim Cook, but also a lot of the media. There was an article that was shared with me. Tim Cook may have just ended Facebook. So I think that's an exaggeration. Their stock's still priced at $260 a share, which gives them a market cap of $750 billion. So I don't see them ending anytime soon. But let's just say maybe that they're under the spotlight. I'm going to try and shine that light on Facebook even more. And the way I want to do this is by really trying to explain Facebook's business model, but using physical terms instead of digital ones. So I'm going to describe Facebook as a coffee shop. Instead of Starbucks, let's call it Facebucks. Oh, and who better to describe Starbucks than Tom Hanks?
The whole purpose of places like Starbucks is for people with no decision-making ability whatsoever to make 6 decisions just to buy 1 cup of coffee. Short, tall, light, dark, calf, decaf, low-fat, non-fat, etc. So people who don't know what the hell they're doing or who on earth they are can, for only $2.95, get not just a cup of coffee, but an absolutely defining sense of self.
So instead of Starbucks, let's call it Facebucks. So Facebook started as this amazing new coffee shop. It's hard to overstate how amazing. It's you go there, hang out with your friends, have a good time, and they offer unlimited free coffee. It's almost too good to be true. Anyone in the world can just hop in, get some free coffee, hang out with whoever they want, maybe even meet some new people over coffee. It's the world's best coffee shop, and it's not even close.
This drink, I like it.
I know, it's great, right?
Another!
That's Thor, by the way, enjoying his first cup of coffee. So anyways, you have this amazing coffee shop, but how is this possible? How are there Facebucks on every street corner? How can they make and give away all this coffee without charging a cent? Well, they do it through advertisements. They have thousands of hidden cameras set up in this coffee shop, watching your every movement. They collect all the data of what you do in that coffee shop, and then they allow advertisers to decorate the coffee shop in ways that are going to appeal to you. The magic of a digital coffee shop is that you can be in the coffee shop with your friend, and each of you will be seeing different ads. Honestly, if that's the price of free coffee and for a great experience, it still sounds like a good trade-off. I'm still pro Facebook at this point. Oh, but then they start putting hidden cameras on the cups themselves. So when you leave Facebucks, you carry that coffee cup with you, and it's still watching you. The cups aren't allowed in some stores, and you of course can leave it behind, but in your busy life, you generally find yourself with a cup of coffee most of the time. So that feels a little bit more creepy. But hey, I've got nothing to hide. I live a pretty boring life, so what's the harm if they follow me around? That's the price of unlimited free coffee. It's way better than spending $1,000 a year on coffee, or going to a coffee shop that's too expensive for my poorer friends. In fact, the coffee's good. Let Samuel L. Jackson tell you how good the coffee is.
God damn, Jimmy. This some serious gourmet shit. Me and Vincent would have been satisfied with some freeze-dried Taster's Choice, right? And he springs this serious gourmet shit on us. What flavor is this?
Knock it off, Julie.
What?
I don't need you to tell me how fucking good my coffee is, okay? I'm the one who buys it. I know how good it is.
How's the coffee so good? There's one thing we didn't account for. They aren't just personalizing the ads. They're personalizing the coffee too. Every time you order coffee, it's different than the person before you or after you. You have to really pay attention to notice the differences, but if you do, you see them. Now we're getting into very creepy territory, but you still might say, isn't personalized coffee the best type of coffee? Isn't this that gourmet shit that Samuel L. Jackson is talking about? I hire a personal trainer instead of just looking up an exercise plan so that someone can come up with the best plan for me. That's pretty compelling. But while you're enjoying this coffee, you start to notice the coffee shop is getting less fun. It seems like there's a lot more shouting going on. You kind of feel shitty every time you walk out the door. You still find yourself going back because, hey, it's free coffee. But it starts to feel a little bit more like this.
Hurry up and order!
Excuse me. Thank you. How about a smoothie? What's in that?
Smoothie's a juice drink. We want coffee.
Buddy, relax.
No, you relax. I'm a regular here. This line needs to move.
I beg your pardon. Do you have scones?
Tall, non-fat, double latte.
Sir, you're at the back of the line.
I recognize that.
Cut it out or you're out of here.
You can't kick me out.
You know what? You're really invading my ear space.
Look, I'm a frequent coffee drinker. I'm part of the club. I have a card. Do you have a card? Do you have a card?
No, I don't have
Does
a
anyone
card.
here have a card?
We don't have frequent drinker cards.
That's a video club card.
Ah!
Zip it there, Sporty Spice.
Are we doing this?
Oh.
Is this happening now?
Yeah, wanna
Sir,
go?
Great, I'd
Let's
love
do
to.
it.
You're hurting me! You're hurting me! What is wrong with you, Derek? I thought we were friends!
My name is Andy!
Your name is Liar, because you're telling lies!
This is what our coffee shop has turned into. Screaming and shouting. It's not fun to go. That's because there's one thing we missed. They're not personalizing the coffee to make it taste best to you because you're not paying them. The advertisers are paying them. Advertisers are paying for your attention. And that means that Facebook isn't trying to make the coffee that tastes the best to you. It's trying to make the coffee that's most addictive to you. That sounds a lot closer to heroin to me than it does to coffee. I mean, I know that sounds scary, and a lot of people often point to their lived experience as a counterargument. The argument goes, honestly, if they're trying to be addictive, they aren't doing that great of a job. I'm a responsible user of Facebook or social media. I get coffee when I want it. I don't when I don't. I ignore the shouting. It's unlimited free coffee. I'm coming out on the plus side of this transaction. And I get that. In fact, that's where I find myself. But the reason that argument is so flawed is because we humans are terrible at thinking exponentially. Let me give you an example. Paper folding. Imagine you had a piece of paper and you folded it over, and then you folded it over again. Then you folded it over again 3 times. And imagine you could fold it over as many times as you wanted, consistently doubling it in thickness. How many folds would it take for you to have a paper the thickness of which would allow you to reach the moon? I'll pause for a second, let you chew on that. The answers I usually heard were somewhere in the order of magnitude of millions, which makes sense. How are you going to fold a piece of paper and reach the fucking moon? But here's an answer.
Now, if you think that the distance between the Earth and the Moon is less than 250,000 miles, then, starting with a piece of Bible paper and folding it 45 times, we get to the moon.
45 times. No matter how many times I hear that, it still blows my mind. I still can't wrap my head around the idea of folding a piece of paper 45 times, somehow getting you to the moon. But that's because humans aren't wired to think in exponential terms. I'll give you one more example. I tried virtual reality in 2016. I was at Pearson. We had a partnership with some VR provider to develop education apps, and I got to try it. And I thought to myself, coming out of that, I can't believe people are pouring money into this. There were billion-dollar VR companies, and I was like, this is a complete waste. This is ridiculous. I had a headache. It was honestly a terrible user experience. I really thought there was no future in this space. Fast forward to 2020, mid-pandemic, my buddy Gary tells me to get an Oculus so we can play ping pong virtually. At first, I'm skeptical, but he convinces me to give it a shot. By the way, I do note the irony of me talking about buying an Oculus, which is owned by Facebook, in a podcast that's devoted to talking about the dangers of Facebook's business model. But now that we're here, what can I do other than continue to contradict myself? Anyways, when I tried it, I did a complete 180. And I think back, and in 2016, I just completely underestimated how much the graphics would change, how much the processing power would change. I just forgot about the power of exponential growth in technologies. I have a lot more to say about virtual reality and augmented reality, but I'll save that for another time. Let's get back to Facebook. The point is, personalization doesn't scare a lot of people because it doesn't feel that ominous. We look at our personal experience with these platforms and can shrug and say, if this is how you guys want to make money, it's fine by me. I save my money, you can try your ad tricks. I know personally I've never clicked on a single Facebook ad and I never will. So joke's on you. But this is an exponential growth story. On both sides. On one side, you have data being created and harnessed on an exponential scale. I mean, just think about the number of data points that we create through our phones, through our apps, through everything we use, compared to just 10 years ago. Even 5 years ago, even 2 years ago. And then on the other side, look at the processing power. You have Moore's Law. You have the machine learning revolution. There's an exponential growth in our ability to sift through data. So kids now live their lives on digital platforms, creating trillions of data points before they even get to high school. Machine learning and artificial intelligence are processing those data points, looking for the signals amidst the noise more and more efficiently. And I'm reminded of a point that first came to my attention from Yuval Noah Harari. The personalization doesn't need to know you perfectly. They just need to know you better than yourself. And honestly, how well do we even know ourselves? Let me give you an example of how easily manipulable we are. I'll use my own children. So I know that they like Wendy's over Chick-fil-A, but I obviously prefer Chick-fil-A. And I can frame the question with my 4-year-old in a certain way. I ask her, I just have the right tone when I describe Wendy's and a little bit more excitement when I describe Chick-fil-A, the order of which one comes first or second. I know by asking my 4-year-old, my 2-year-old will copy. And I can, with about 75% accuracy, get them to pick Chick-fil-A over Wendy's. So I know I'm manipulating them pretty successfully with all I'm doing is a subtle change in tone and the framing of a question. And sure, you'd like to think you're smarter than my 4-year-old and 2-year-old. First of all, you're probably not, but let's assume that you are. You don't have to read much of Daniel Kahneman, the Nobel Prize-winning psychologist, to understand how much we succumb to biases in our lives. We're manipulated in so many ways, from the most recent things that come to mind to the order in which things are presented. So if what Facebook and others are doing with your data doesn't scare you now, think of what they'll be able to do in 30 years with the data they've been gathering from birth on your kids and the generation around them. At that point, the coffee might as well be heroin. In fact, they might just look like the heroin addicts on the streets of San Francisco, except they'll still be living in your house hanging out on some Facebook-like platform online. I'm not trying to be unnecessarily dystopic. I mean, The Social Dilemma and others do a great job of pointing out many of these dangers, so this isn't new information. I mean, obviously, even as I'm telling you this, I know that I haven't fully internalized these possibilities myself because while I've deleted and disabled my Facebook account, I still use WhatsApp. I very much have this laissez-faire attitude to the whole thing. So what's my point? I don't know. Wouldn't it be awesome if our digital coffee shops could still offer free coffee without the personalization? If we could keep the beauty of a free and open social network without the ugliness? This may sound utopian, but there are possibilities. I'm not going to go into them in details, but here are a few areas that really excite me about the possible future of the internet. First, in terms of payment methods. I'm obsessed with this idea of opt-out payment methods. There's this field within behavioral economics called nudge theory, and there's a lot of evidence that by opting into something, there's a barrier, and by opting out of something, you get much more adoption. They've proven this with 401ks. When you have to opt into your 401k, the adoption rates are way lower than if you have to opt out of your 401k matching plan. And so why can't we use this with payment methods? There's been this movement around like pay as you can or pay as you wish or choose what you pay. It started, I remember, with the Radiohead album where you could just type in the amount you wanted to pay. But what I really love is there's this app called Waking Up, and it has a price. I mean, I think it's $100 a year, and it's an opt-out payment method. You can opt not to pay. There's no means test. There's no question. You just have to send an email saying rather not pay, and you can adopt. And I think that could really somehow maintain openness while giving people a reasonable path to revenue. Another area that excites me is the idea of personalizing, but letting the individual be the one to personalize. So I like this concept of choosing your own ads. I know Hulu has started to do this. That's the only platform that I'm aware of. Maybe it's much more common. Which I like the idea of saying, hey, we are still going to personalize, but you can be the one to express those preferences instead of us creepily watching you and trying to anticipate what will work. Let's give you the agency, understand that you're a part of our business model, and see how you can support us in this way. That excites me. And then there's these opportunities for like open source models for moderation, like Wikipedia. And then you have the possibility of things like Signal, which are showing that you can build high quality functioning platforms that don't require data. And so I think if we marry some of these things with a lot of possibilities, there is a path to doing this. I don't know exactly how we get there, It feels daunting, but I think it's important that we eventually do. I don't think nutrition labels are the answer, but I appreciate the sentiment from Tim Cook's speech. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed this. Please do share it with someone who might find it enjoyable, and let me know what you think. I'm new to this, so any feedback is welcome. Lastly, this title. Wouldn't it be awesome if? I've become obsessed with this framing because I just think there's this optimism in that statement that's also paired with accessibility. This is honestly a question that I ask my kids all the time when we're planning our day. Nobody feels intimidated to weigh in on a subject if the question is, wouldn't it be awesome if? We all feel like, hey, we can think about that. We can engage with it. And that's what I'm going for here, which is like, let me take on issues that I'm clearly unqualified to talk about, but through a lens of just trying to think about what possibly might be better. Anyways, let me leave you with a quick coffee sign out.
Large black coffee.
Do you mean a venti?
No, I mean a large.
He means a venti. Yeah, the biggest one you got. Venti is large.
No, venti is 20.
Danny.
Yeah. Large is large. In fact, tall is large, and grande is Spanish for large. Venti's the only one that doesn't mean large. It's also the only one that's Italian. Congratulations, you're stupid in 3 languages.